we have a part that is very often ignored or underestimated, which is your mindset and your way of thinking in-game. The human brain is made in a way where if you do a certain activity a few times, the next time you're gonna be able to do it without thinking about it. And well, this is very, very useful in a lot of situations. If you want to improve at something, it's very important that you improve consciously. So the first part of these tips are basically tricks that you can use to make sure that you actually think about what you're doing instead of autopiloting. So this is maybe a bit redundant, but I spoke to Excalibur about this, and he basically told me treat every single game like it's the grand finals of TI. You want that level of focus. And while I understand that this is actually impossible because there's no crowd, there's no like big prize or pressure, but you should try to just focus completely on the game. You shouldn't alt-tab when the game is paused, and you shouldn't have Netflix running on your second monitor. And if possible, you should be like in a place where there's no other people screaming or doing other stuff. You just want to make sure that you have your entire attention focused on Dota. You're gonna play better. It's not always possible, but it's really nice if you can make sure that you're in a calm area and then focus completely on the game. I mentioned this part before, but you basically want to think about everything that you are doing. If you are walking somewhere in the game or trying to make a kill, you need to make sure that you do it with purpose, that you think about why am I doing this, how am I gonna do this, how does this action affect the game. I mentioned this before, but try to think about what you're doing instead of just doing it. Next up, this is kind of an interpersonal skill thing too, but at the start of the game and in the game you want to make sure that you play with the people you are compatible with, which basically means if someone is griefing or playing poorly, you might not want to play around them as much. For instance, yesterday I was playing Lashrak and I had Scandal as well as Ark in my team. And Scandal was playing a Templar Assassin and he was playing against the Venomancer mid, so he got completely destroyed. So at first I tried to help him, but at some point I realized this is just not gonna work. He is having a terrible game, so I'm just gonna play together with my Lycan Ark and try to make some stuff happen on the map with him. And even though my Templar Assassin had a really poor game, my Lycan had a really good game, and because I was trying to help him and empowering him, we managed to turn the game around and actually win. So you need to find the people that you want to play with and play with them. So this part is probably one of the most important parts, which is to think about objectives. I mentioned before how it's super easy to just turn off your brain, and I know this from personal experience because I play a lot of carry, that it's so easy to just farm the entire game, just click neutral creeps and have a nice GPM number, and you're gonna hear that clinking sound of gold a lot, and it feels really good. But if you consciously think about what your team needs to win the game, you're gonna find that very often farming or whatever is not going to help you. So just try to think about what your team needs in order to win this game, because getting kills and getting towers and getting farm, it's all nice, but you really need to think about what your path to victory is. If you don't have a win objective, whether it be farming, team fighting, taking a Roche, if you don't have such an objective to win the game, you are not going to win the game. I think that in matchmaking, it is generally best to have a really safe, conservative playstyle and to not give up too many kills. One example of this is Limp. He is this mid player who in pubs just farms a lot and sits mid and has very little deaths. And I think while this is a very good style to win games, I don't think it's the most useful style to actually improve. Because I think that in order to improve, you kind of need to know the limits of your hero as well as you as a player. So while you don't always want to go for risky plays, because you tend to end up throwing a lot of games and you might even end up in low priority because of it. I do think it's very nice in order to think consciously about what you do, to sometimes make some risky plays just to try to push your limits, because the next time you're gonna have a better idea of what your hero can do and what you can do. For instance, when you are playing against some offlaner and you're playing like a Jack, sometimes it might just be worth it to try to spin and kill him on the tower, just to know for next time how much damage you can do and what you can get away with. It's not always good, but thinking about it, even if you don't do it, I think is very useful, and I try to do this a lot. So this is personally the most useful tip for my in-game improving. My dad always used to ask me when I didn't know something, what would you say if you did know? And I always thought this was a bloody stupid question, because I didn't know, right? But like a few months ago, I was playing against Puppy in a pub, and it seemed like every single second of this game and every play I made, Puppy anticipated and just reacted so beautifully, even before I did it. So when he was out of position and I wanted to gank him, he would be gone just slightly before I could gank him. Or he would have two teammates behind him. And when I was out of position, he was already there and ready to gank me. So this got me thinking, how do I recreate this kind of incredible game sense? And because I was thinking like this, I was way more active in thinking about my moves. And because of this, I believe I actually ended up winning the game. Just because I was thinking so much about how to be one step ahead of Puppy. And thinking like this really helps me a lot. I mentioned Puppy, but I think one of the best carries out there is Resolution. And I think he has this really good sense of the game where he knows exactly how much farming he can get away with. Basically, he knows exactly when he has to go back. Like, he farms a creep wave, and then he realizes that there's like one more creep wave he can farm before going back. And just thinking about these better players helps you actively think about what you're doing. And I know from myself that I tend to be a bit of a greedy player. So if I think about what other professional carries would be doing, like Crystallize or Resolution or ITZ, and I think, would they really build a Midas right now instead of a BKB? And very often this answer is no. And I tend to make this excuse of, no, it's just my playstyle to be a greedy. But thinking about what better people would do, which is what WWA BPD stands for, what would a better player do? This helped me a lot, especially with my item builds and my greediness, farming in games. I would think, what would a better player do? And very often the answer was different from what I was initially planning to do. So constantly thinking about this, it's gonna help you consciously try to be next level. And this really helps you thinking about objectives too, because some things in Dota, they just feel really good, right? If you're playing a really fat carry and you kill a support, it just feels good. If you're playing like this mid with great wave clear and there's like two waves pushing a tower, and you just clear it with one spell, it feels really good. But even though it feels really good, sometimes it doesn't help you win the game. And if you think, what would the best player I've ever seen right now do? Very often the answer is not the thing that feels good, but the thing that helps you win the game. And just try to think about what the best player in the world would do. And this just changes the way your brain works to something where you're actually thinking. Because even when you don't want to autopilot, very often if you don't actively think about stuff, you like transition back into this mindset where you're just doing stuff without thinking. But if you constantly have WWABPD in your head, this changes. And of course it's not instantly gonna get you 2000 MMR, but having this kind of mindset where you try to think one step ahead, it really helped me a lot, and I think it will help you a lot as well. So one of my favorite pro players of all time once said this:
when game is going full retard, you can only go with it. If you start going against it, if you start going half retard, you're fucking done for, man. Game is done right there.
This is maybe the most terrible advice I've ever heard. If game is going full retard and people start playing really poorly and tilting and doing stupid moves over and over again, the best thing you can possibly do is try to slow down the game. This helps you like get your brain back on track, because sometimes when your team is doing stupid shit, you get really annoyed and you get upset, and that affects your play, and you're gonna make stupid moves too, or you're gonna even follow your team, which is sometimes just not the right thing to do. So when team is going full retard or game is going full retard, you need to close down your brain. You need to not think about what other people are doing and just try to think to yourself, what can I do to win the game? What is my win objective? And if people are doing stupid shit, don't bloody follow them. Just play your own game and don't get dragged down by how stupid other people are. Don't go full retard. It's a lie. So in the past, I have struggled quite a bit with tilt. And I think a lot of Dota players have. And it's kind of difficult to deal with because it completely affects like your entire way of thinking. Once you start tilting, it's very, very hard to stop. But one thing that kind of helped me is like this inspirational quote, which sounds a bit stupid, but it's basically like this: you don't have to be the human being that you were 5 seconds ago. Change can always happen, basically. So if you just die 3 times split pushing as an anti-mage, I mean, that's a pattern, sure, but it doesn't mean that next time you're gonna die as well. It's basically the gambler's fallacy, but like in reverse. That there's a pattern and something happened before doesn't mean that it has to happen again. And it's not even gambling because you are gonna be in control. And if you realize that you played poorly in the past, doesn't mean you have to play poorly in the future. It can kind of help you with your mindset. And I know that tilt generally comes from outside sources, like a feeding team or some griefer. But there are gonna be games where you are gonna play poorly and you're gonna tilt because of it. You can't really control other people, and reacting to other people doing stupid shit is one of the toughest things in life. But when I play poorly and I tilt because of it, just thinking about the fact that I am in control helps me a lot. And it's not gonna stop you from tilting ever, because tilting is just a pretty natural thing. And I believe it happens to every single Dota player. And if people say they don't tilt, they're lying. Everyone has bad games, and if you have bad games, you're gonna play worse because you know you're having a bad game. But just know that you are in control, and if you fed before or if you did stupid shit, it doesn't mean that you're gonna keep doing stupid shit. And if other people do stupid shit, I mean, what can you do? Just move on. Or, like, one thing that I like to do after a really poor game where I played well but my teammates were griefing is just take a walk for 5 minutes. I'll go say hello to my parents, I'll go walk my dog, I'll go throw a little ball for her so she can play. I don't know, just step away from your PC, get something to drink, and then when you feel like you wanna play again, go play again. Or maybe don't go play, take like a few hours break or a week, whatever. Just make sure that you feel ready to play and 100% focused, like I said before. If you're not focused, you're not gonna play well, and if you're tilted, just step away, think about what you can do, and that the fact that you tilted doesn't mean you have to tilt again. That's all. So the next part is a very touchy subject, and easily the best example again is Chappie. He is a very mechanically skilled player, but when something doesn't go his way, he instantly throws, sells his items and ruins the game. And this is a pretty bloody awful thing to do, and I realize this. But my dad asked me, like, if he's such an idiot and he always plays like that, how is he still a decent rank? And that got me thinking, why is that? And I think the most logical explanation to this is the fact that because he throws all the games where he's losing, it means that he has a very short average game time. And if you have a very short average game time, it means that you're gonna be able to play more games in the same amount of time. Basically, if you have a 52% win rate, but you play 10 games per day, you're gonna get a higher rank than someone who has a 54% win rate, but can only play like 4 games. So I would never ever tell you to throw or sell your items, but one thing that you can do is, for instance, when the enemy is pushing your base, like, it's a very touchy thing, and there is a subtle line between being efficient and being an asshole. But I think that sometimes it's gonna be worth it to not defend, even if there's a 1% chance that you can win. And I don't always do this myself, but for instance, when I'm playing like a jug and we lost every single lane and someone sold his items on my team, like my mid, and the enemy has a Spectre, I'm not gonna Blade Fury every single wave. I'm just gonna sit in base and move on. And not only does this make your game shorter sometimes, it also helps you mentally. Because if you're gonna keep fighting every single game, it's gonna tire you out at some point. So basically what I'm trying to say is not feed or sell your items or shit like that, but when you know you only have a 1% chance to win, sometimes you just wanna sit in base and move on mentally to the next game instead of trying to defend. And the only situation in which I do this is actually when one of my core players sells his items, because I believe that there is a lot to be learned from playing from behind and trying to make comebacks. But when you're playing 4v5 and your team is not cooperating, I think this is a big factor, not cooperating. Sometimes you just want to move on and just be efficient with your time. I mean, you only live once, right? You don't want to spend your entire life just playing games that you don't think you have any chance of winning. So I mentioned this briefly in the WWABPD part, which is that a lot of players, they have this thing about them where they're using their playstyle as an excuse. Like they would make a bad move, like they would be way too greedy, or they wouldn't be farming as much and they would just be running around the map trying to find kills. And they're like, yeah, but it's just my playstyle. But I think playstyle is basically a lazy way of saying I don't want to improve. Because when you think about a player that is very good at farming, like his playstyle is being really farmed and then finishing the game off the back of that farm. That's like, alright, that's decent, right? Wrong. Being good at one thing and having this as your playstyle basically means that you're not as good at the other things. So I think you should stop thinking about your playstyle as a set in stone thing. I think you should use your playstyle to identify your flaws. For instance, if you're a player that's really good at comebacks, you can think about those comebacks as your playstyle, and this is what a lot of people do, but I don't think it's a very useful thing to think about. I think instead you should think, I win a lot of games in a certain way, in this case comebacks. What does that mean about me as a player? And if you're good at comebacks, it might mean that you're less good at laning, for instance. And if you realize this, you can try to watch some replays of yourself where you're laning, and you can try to find some other players that are maybe really good at laning and try to do what they're doing. But if you realize that your playstyle is not a thing that is set in stone, and you should basically improve at the thing that is opposite to your playstyle, it's gonna help you. And now I realize that this is also a post-game thing very much. But even in game, I see people making stupid decisions like building BOTs and Battle Fury and Midas on the same hero and then be like, yeah, but it's just my playstyle to farm a lot. Don't do this, just try to think about the best way to win the game. And this is not always easy, and you're gonna be used to the way you play, but you need to think about what is best, not the best way you like to play. So it's just something to keep in the back of your head, to not like think that the way you play is set in stone. Often your playstyle just means that you're worse at other stuff, and we don't really like change. It's like this evolutionary concept that change is hard and annoying. So just try to think about what you're doing, and especially what you're not doing. This is gonna help you.